Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm your host of the Whole Triathlete Podcast, where I'm trying to help you improve performance, improve aging process, and burn fat, and all those other good things that we love to do as we train and try to keep active and slow the aging process down. So we have one of my favorites on the show again, Dr. Wilson, to talk about how we can improve that aging process and continue training and racing and not cause adrenal issues, as I talk about on every show. So, Dr. Wilson, thank you for coming on the show again. It's been about a year since we had you on last time.
Yes, it has, Debbie, and it's a pleasure to be here again. Thank you for having me again.
Well, you kind of match my journey. As I shared over the years, my Life's Not Race book, and I'm off to Ironman Hawaii to share my book and share my story and try to get the word out that life is not a race, it is a journey. And there's so many people out there. I see athletes, non-athletes, but we're just so chronically busy and stressed and trying to do more in the day. And I just seem to see more health issues becoming an epidemic based on, our addiction to cell phones and social media and all that, and electromagnetic frequency and toxins. There's just so much stress inside and outside our lives. So I know you specialize in adrenal fatigue, and you kind of are the father of it. What have you found over the years since you started doing this? How many years ago?
Well, let's see. I had my first patient in 1978 suffering from adrenal fatigue. So it's been almost 50 years. And it's been a very interesting journey because I've seen different kinds of people get into adrenal fatigue and recover in different ways. And it's remarkable to hear their stories, because just about the time you think you've heard them all and all the scenarios and they come together, you hear a unique one. And then it makes me think, why did that happen? How'd that happen? And I'm constantly being re-educated by meeting people, listening to stories, hearing different things, talking to doctors around the world about their patients and the stress that their patients are suffering from. So let's don't forget that adrenal fatigue is a stress-related illness. And stress comes in many sizes and colors and shapes. And people, one of the biggest things is that people don't often realize they're under stress. There was a Wall Street Journal article about 2 years ago, and it was on women who prided themselves on how much stress they could take. These were mainly executives in New York, and they were priding themselves on how much stress they could endure. And I was just thinking to myself, I would bet you if we did a 10 or 15 year longevity study, we wouldn't find many of those women at the top of their game anymore, because they'll go and they'll push themselves. And then when they start getting tired, then of course they'll have an extra cup of coffee, and coffee doesn't work anymore. So they have Red Bull, and then that doesn't work. So maybe they get into a few pills that start keeping them going. And then they start taking, and they're so amped by the time they need to go to bed, they need a pill to get to sleep again. And they don't realize it. And then something happens, a little bump in the road. It could be an accident, an injury, an illness, an extra assignment, a job that didn't go through, something. And then, whoa, the downfall ends up being pretty quick. And not always. Sometimes it's a gradual thing, but oftentimes it's fairly sick. It's now we're in the fall. We'll have respiratory illnesses that will take down a number of people. Mm-hmm. And how that works is that the adrenals are very intimately connected with the respiratory system. So that there's a two-pronged, or it's kind of circular, that when someone has low adrenal function and they're continuing to push themselves, they make themselves more vulnerable to respiratory illnesses. And then when they have respiratory illnesses, they're more vulnerable to pulling down the adrenal glands. And so a lot of these people will come to me in January, February and say, I've been in the hospital 3 times this year and I don't know what to do with myself. I'm getting ill with everything that passes around and I don't know what happened. I used to be so healthy. And the truth is that the adrenals are very strong in affecting the immune system. Every single white blood cell in your body has cortisol receptors, several thousand cortisol receptors on them. And they respond and they need cortisol and other adrenal hormones in order to respond appropriately. And when they don't have it, then the immune system can't spring up like it needs to when you normally would pass someone on the subway and your body would fight it off. Now you pass someone on the subway and you get what they got. And we can see this in some of the illnesses like AIDS, where the immune system just disappears. Normally, we'd have someone who was immune to these kind of things, like Mycobacterium, but they suddenly become devastated and can even be killed by it because their immune system is almost non-existent. And people can get such weak adrenals to where it's very difficult for their immune system to fight like it needs to. So that's one of the biggest things I see with athletes is they push themselves to the point to where if they miss a day, they're slackers. If they don't go that extra mile, they're not putting out like they need to.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that rest is an important part of training. And go back to a German study that was done about 40 years ago. And they showed that even when they took open-end wrenches, and they put them on machines, and one machine continually made the wrench work, tightening bolts. The other machine had intermittent rest for the open-end wrench. Even metal wrenches responded so that the ones that got rest broke a lot later than the ones that were constantly being tightened. Mm-hmm. So even metal breaks when it's not allowed to rest. So we see that people, like, for example, you got triathletes, and these triathletes are probably, a lot of them, training up until the day before they train. No, the 3 days before they go to the competition, they should be doing just 15, 30 minutes of high-intensity training, 15 minutes or so. That's all for the day. That's it. And rest. And then they want to make sure that they're taking extra adrenal support, because that is a long time to endure and put your body out. And what gland or organ in the body is more important than keeping you going and keeping that wall and making sure glycogen is available in liver and muscle tissues than the adrenal? Mm-hmm. Hyponatremia is a real problem. Low sodium in elite athletes who are on marathons or triathletes. And this is specifically related to the adrenal glands because there are 2 major hormones, aldosterone and cortisol. And those, especially aldosterone, when the adrenals are active, they push up the potassium and they lower the sodium. And I'm sorry, they when the adrenals are active, they push up the cortisol and lower the potassium. But then as the adrenals start to fatigue, then the potassium starts to elevate and the sodium starts to decrease, so that by the time they hit the wall or they're toward the end of the race, and especially the next day, when they look at them, they're suffering from hyponatremia because the adrenals simply can't put out that amount of aldosterone and can't put out that amount of cortisol to keep those electrolytes in balance like they're supposed to.
And that's a big thing in hot weather races, as you know, we're going to Ironman Hawaii, and that's the specialty. The uniqueness of that race is the wind and the hot pavement off the ground that people get really dehydrated and hard to fuel. But I think so many athletes, which is why I'm trying to focus this as more of my main job, to get this message out that even though we love to do training and racing, and how do you do it without breaking yourself like I did for so many years? And finally, 2013, I haven't been able to race since. And my body, 5 years later, is still not wanting to go anything longer than 8 miles in a run, for example. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we have to retrain our mindset, but how we train so we give that recovery time, I think, is so essential and less is more and more is not better. And as you said, most triathletes are all type A personalities that do this sport, that, it's hard to have that stop and rest and reboot the system more throughout the day when you're trying to fit in swim, bike, run workouts and strength training and yoga and Pilates and trying to have a family and, working full time. It's just a big juggle. So I'm trying to coach people how to do it and manage that stress the right amount, so you don't go over that tipping point.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things is when they're actually racing, one of the problems we found with hyponatremia is that intake of water can actually increase the severity of hyponatremia because it waters down the sodium that's already in your body. So just regular water can actually make the low sodium problem worse. So, easy solution. You simply lightly salt your water. And that can be, it doesn't have to be just salt. It can be liquid aminos. It can be that combined with a little bit of some sort of sweetener that we don't want fruit or fructose, because that doesn't get into the glycogen in the muscles, and it doesn't allow the muscles then to develop use their glycogen, it's not as easy for the muscles to use fructose. So we want to stay away from that. But easy energy stuff, we want to make sure that their ATP is sufficient, so that not only do we take care of the adrenals, we'll talk about in a little bit more specifically, but we also want to make sure that they can make the right amount of ATP. So we want to make sure they've got enough CoQ10 in their system. The D-ribose, it's another thing they can have as a sweetener in their drinks, is D-ribose. That easily absorbed and taken into the energy of the body as they're exercising. It can go with the salt and the sodium when in their water bottles. And so the D-ribose then helps keep their ATP up. Then the other thing, L-carnitine, is an important thing to keep the ATP up. Before, when they're in the training, you want to make sure they have biotin and enough vitamin E, so that there's different things that they need. Magnesium, of course, and I find probably 1 in 20 elite athletes that I speak with take care. They may be really hip on creatine and trying to get 12 grams of creatine or whatever, but they're ignorant about the vitamins and minerals that metabolize these different things that they need in order to give them the stamina, in order to rebuild their body when they have injuries and other things like that. So if they don't look at themselves in a more complete way, a lot of them get injured. And then a lot of these injuries are from minor nutritional deficiencies that they can't recover from.
I think a lot of people tend to eat, maybe they're getting better at doing them, real food, but a lot of those processed foods and, that are not filled with any good nutrition. And that's when we first started this podcast back in 2011. It was about eating more healthy fats and less sugars and processed foods, and just teaching the body to be fat burning is less stress in the body than having, all the sugar that we used to be taught or still taught for some people to have every hour, have, so many grams of carbs and how many liquid bottles of sugar water and stuff. That I think that is also big stress on your body, and you're not getting the nutrition that you need and helping the ATP production. And
sure.
And then afterwards having more stress in the body, recovering and cellular level damage, I would think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So I think a lot of people struggle with recovery, as you're saying. And also, if you go to any races, it's easy to see that a lot of people do triathlons, maybe just to reach that goal, crossing the finish line, or marathon. They do these endurance events, but maybe secretly they're trying to do it to lose weight. And I don't see a lot of people have a lot of clients that actually lose weight. I just had someone do Grand Canyon training for the rim to rim hike, walk, run they're doing. And she's like, I'm not losing any weight. So what do you know on the adrenal side in your training, why a lot of people don't lose weight when they add this endurance training in? You think they would, right? 3,500 calories used to equal 1 pound of fat loss, but we know better.
Well, there are many things that can go into that, one of the first things we want to do is have them check their basal body temperature in the very first thing in the morning. And we're looking for a basal body temperature that's above 97.8 degrees. So you've heard 98.6 is the normal body temperature, which almost nobody has. But anyway, if the body temperature is below 97.8 degrees, then there's a good chance that they may have a low thyroid. And losing weight with even a minorly low thyroid becomes a very difficult situation. So they can, if they want to find out more about signs and symptoms of low thyroid, they can go to our website, adrenalfatigue.org, and we have a questionnaire there for people suffering from what signs and symptoms of low thyroid. They can take this, and they can see if they have a number of the different symptoms of low thyroid. And if they do, then we need to treat the thyroid. But you don't want to forget about the adrenals when you're talking about the thyroid, because remember, when in the thyroid gland, how the thyroid makes its hormones is it gets its orders from the pituitary gland, something called thyroid-stimulating hormone that comes down from the pituitary gland. And it goes to the thyroid gland that's a little butterfly-shaped gland on your neck. And it stimulates the TSH, it's called, thyroid-stimulating hormone, stimulates the manufacture of T4. There's two hormones in the thyroid made by the thyroid gland, one called T4 and the other called T3. And it's simply because one has 4 iodine molecules on it and the other only has 3 molecules of iodine on it. So we have about 80% of it in the thyroid gland is made out of T. It makes T4. Then that T4 goes down to the liver, and one of those iodine molecules is clipped off and becomes T3. Then it goes out to the body and becomes active. You need cortisol to release the TSH from the pituitary gland. You need it to convert T4 to T3 in the liver or the thyroid, wherever it occurs. And you also need cortisol at the site where the thyroid receptor is in each cell. Because if you don't have enough cortisol, your thyroid can't work, and it'll decrease the thyroid activity by as much as 50%. So people often overlook the value of the adrenals in cortisol, as a matter of fact, or in thyroid production. And of course, then thyroid is one of the major glands you look at when people have difficulty losing weight. Another thing that we look at is of course, obviously the adrenal function. But I think before we talk about that, and in relation to that, one of the biggest things that happens with people is they tend to stress about how they're exercising. So they don't have the joy of exercising. Mm-hmm. They're pushing themselves. They're striving. And that's a stress that tends to drive insulin up. And when you have the combination of higher cortisol and higher insulin, it tends to pack it around the abdomen area. If the low thyroid tends to pack it around the thighs and the hips, the adrenals can be low most of the day, but if you're pushing them by exercising, and exercise and food are the two major things that increase cortisol during the day. If you're exercising, and especially if you've had some fairly refined carbohydrate food within the 2 hours beforehand, your body is going to normally pack this away. Because when you look at people and their journey through life over thousands of years, there were a lot of times they didn't have that food available to them. So anytime there was excess calories available, they said, hey, pack it on, because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. So when that insulin went up and that extra carbohydrate, that extra calorie load came on, and the cortisol rose in the same time, they started gaining the weight. So I've had people on 800-calorie diets that gained weight, and they've been to 12 doctors. Why do I gain weight when I'm doing this? Well, we look at the adrenals, and you say, well, your adrenals are low. So if my adrenals are low, how could I ever gain weight? It's because maybe 1 or 2 times during the day, or during the times you're stressing, you're also snacking. That's going to raise your cortisol and your insulin, along with the blood sugar is going to be higher. And that is going to lock that in to the fat.
Even if you're eating lower carbohydrates, I think if people are trying to do more good healthy fats and protein and carbs, would they still have blood sugar dysregulation when they have low or high cortisol levels?
It depends on the person and on their metabolism. So if they're it's kind of complicated. If they're an estrogen dominant person, then they can just breathe and they'll gain weight. If they're low thyroid, which and high estrogen and low thyroid go together because estrogen tends to suppress thyroid, and higher thyroid hormones tend to suppress estrogen. But if you have someone who's higher estrogen, they tend to gain weight more easily too, and that weight is once again it's more toward the butt and the thighs, a little bit like thyroid. But if they're a high pituitary type, they're going to gain all over, and they're not going to show an abdominal type. But so usually the ones that have the abdominal belly, the apple kind of body, or that's where they pack on the fat, that's going to be usually due to high adrenal at certain times of the day. But like I say, some people can be low cortisol, low adrenal during most of the day. And if it's only high during an hour or two during the day, and it's also the time when they tend to eat, then they may actually put on weight even though they're overall low adrenal function.
Wow. Hormones are so complicated. I was studying them all weekend, trying to write a blog and work on a nutritional therapy client. And so I wanted to talk today about, because your adrenals, everyone's adrenals seem to be hyper or hypoadrenic. And in nutritional therapy, we do all those tests that you have in your book, the eye pupil test and the blood pressure, lying down to standing. And I haven't had anyone pass those tests. But then everyone's on thyroid medication too. So I feel like even myself, we need to deal with the source of stress, what's going on, help your adrenal support and work on the thyroid. But if you keep having that stress, whatever is in your life, it's still this, like you're just putting a Band-Aid on, taking the thyroid medications most doctors give so many people I know.
So how many triathletes do you know, how many people do you know that actually take a day off?
None. A day off is swimming. Or going to do, everyone's always doing something. And that's, we talk a lot lately. I'm doing this coaching program with Ben Greenfield, and it's talking about, overtraining, but it's called under recovery and not recovering enough, and, doing some different things that you can do to help recovery. But I think it is a big issue. Yes. Yeah.
And so they don't have time of non-activity or that day is only enjoyable activity, not stressful activity. I'm not talking about taking roller coasters. I'm talking about having nice walks in the park, enjoyable, relaxing times, particular individual times, or if it's not stressful to be with family and loved ones, but only restorative, enjoyable events. It's a seldom picture, and it was hard to get in when I was practicing to get my patients to do that. But the ones that did it were very successful in recovering. Mm-hmm. And so whether you're religious or not, that saying on the seventh day shall you rest has a tremendous health benefit to it. That, in the Old Testament, it prescribes how much work they could do on the Sabbath, because I'm pretty sure there were a lot of type A people, and they said, well, it wouldn't hurt to do this on the Sabbath, and it wouldn't hurt to do this and this on the Sabbath. Well, you know what I'll do? I'll just cut out this, and that's probably good enough for the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So that's why they had to lay down the laws. This is how much work you can do. This is how much work women can do. Yeah. You have to prepare your food the day before, and so that on the seventh they rested. And so whatever religion you are, your body also says you should rest. And 1 out of 7's good a number as I know. That we know that Ford workers, when they had the study on the 10-day working, the 10-hour working week, 7 days a week, versus people that work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, there was only a 10% increase in production for the whole 7 days with the people that work 7 days. So those extra 2 days, they only produced another 10%, but they were there for 70 hours. As opposed to 40 hours, the other people were. So there's this give and take. Just because it's your office, just because you're working 12 hours, doesn't mean you're doing the most efficient work. As a matter of fact, on NPR last week had someone on a show that they were talking about scarcity. They were talking about scarcity of time, and they talked about this medical doctor that had she known it, she would have said, "I had such complete adrenal fatigue that I just totally burnt out." And she said when she in her therapy, they taught her to take time off and they taught her to relax, and she came back and working a normal schedule became 4 times more productive because she took the time off to rest during those times she was actually off work. So that's one of the biggest things I could say for the goal-driven person is take time to not do anything. And this doctor said that was one of the toughest things for her to learn is to not do anything. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sit cross-legged and do pranayama all day, but it means that you do enjoyable, relaxing, rejuvenating in activities that you love to do.
And I always include the electronic detox as well. Like when you do those days, don't go on your email, don't look at your text, whatever you can do to just stay off social media, phone, computer, iPad, stuff like that. I think that is so important to do. I did that on a vacation the other week, said, okay, I'm offline. I'll see you in a week. If anything happens, so be it. I think we need to do that more often, or at least like one day a week, Sundays, whatever it might be, 24-hour cycle. You are just disconnected, unplugged. And
then I'm sure that when you coach your clients, you also tell them to etch out at least a half an hour a day of rest and relaxation or enjoyment. And that's important too. So it's not just this one day a week, but in each day to take time.
Yeah. And I think I always say it's that saying, I think you might have said in your book somewhere, like every airplane ride, what do they say when you're taking off? Put your oxygen mask on first. And I have clients that I do personal training with at my fitness studio. A lot of people, have a big event. They're putting on an auction. They're doing this, they're doing that. And they put off taking care of themselves and exercise and their nutrition and just well-being because it goes to the side so they can continue working hard. And it's this ongoing cycle with so many people that I don't think they realize, you'll perform better in daily life and your requirements with your family and your workplace and friends if you take that time out to take care of you. Instead, people feel guilty that they're, coming to go for a run meal a day and go back to work, that they're not working 12 hours that day. And I think that's a big shift in our mind we need to reboot.
Yeah. There's an essay that was written by Lao Tzu, who was an ancient Chinese Taoist. And he wrote an essay called The Usefulness of Uselessness. And if you can think of yourself during one day as being useless, that's such a freeing. You don't have to be anybody's beck and call. You don't have to answer phones. You don't have to go to the emails. You can do exactly what you want to do. Mm-hmm. It's such a freeing thing for you to do. And the thing is, Debbie, we're talking about triathletes, and we're really talking about the race of life, aren't we?
Yeah. That's why I always say it's triathletes, but just everybody. The same rules apply to everyone. We all need to push that pause, reboot button more throughout the day.
So how old are they designing themselves to live?
Yeah. Well, that's my next question. We're going to talk about aging, the aging process. So we're speeding up the aging process with all this training. And there's a lot of research on that at cellular level, how you can speed up aging process. So I'm all about slowing the aging process and improving it and not, training and racing this excessive amount, that chronic cardio they talk about. When you're training for Ironman, you got a lot of volume you have to do. So how can we do it and not increase the aging process at the same time?
Well, one of the things you can't do is you can't pull on your antioxidant reserves. One of the biggest things about dealing with stress and dealing with aging, and by the way, stress and aging have many, many parallels when you look at the physiology and the biochemistry, that aging and stress have many parallels. As a matter of fact, Celia showed over and over and over that his rats and his animal models, that as they stress, they also age more quickly. And so as people stress themselves, they will probably age more quickly. There's the chronological age and there's the biological age. And then as they continually are taking out more than they're putting in, as they're continually asking demands of their body beyond what their body should respond to. That is something that encourages aging. And so what we want to do is make sure we stay within the homeostasis. The demands don't exceed what we can easily meet during most times. So when someone feels themselves pushing themselves, they may not be doing themselves a favor. The Body, Mind, and Sport book written by Diamond a long time ago talked about how important it was for people that were training endurance to only breathe through their nose. And he did an experiment where he had cyclists who were cycling as fast as they could all the time. And then for the people that were in the station, they were both the stationary bikes, and the people on the stationary bikes could only breathe through their nose. And at first, the people on the other side that just pushed themselves and breathed through their mouth and nose were much better. But with time, over about 2 to 3 months, then the people who only breathed through their nose became faster and had much more endurance, and everything about their parameters were much superior to the people that were pushing themselves initially, because these people increased their capacity at an even rate according to what their body demands are. So their body got used to these physical demands, and they were performing much better athletes. He specialized in elite athletes, especially tennis players and soccer players, and he found that he had to get people back to a base of rest and recovery, and then as they started the rehabilitation, to only go to the capacity to which they could breathe through their mouth, because that's the capacity their body could recover at. And if he gradually pulled them up, that's what allowed them to finally recover. He didn't talk about much about nutrition, but I was just thinking, wow, if he could have also combined adrenal supplements along with some other specifics, he would have had a world famous. Well, he's already world famous, but anyway, he would have had even much better results than what he had.
What was that book called again?
Body, Mind, and Sport.
Yeah, Ben Greenfield in this Keon coaching program I'm doing with him, that book keeps coming up. Body, Mind, and Sport. And it's been around. I looked it up on Amazon. It's been out a long time, as he said.
Yeah, 30 years or so. Yeah.
Huh. That's funny. You two were on top of it. You wrote your book and started doing this so many years ago, and now it's becoming, this big area of opportunity for everyone.
I see. Last year, maybe it was last year or the year before. Anyway, whenever Jim Carrey was on the Academy Awards, someone was late coming. He goes, "Oh, it must be their adrenals." So even though adrenal function has gotten to Hollywood now. As a matter of fact, I know that because we treat a lot of well-known Hollywood people, order our supplements, and they usually order it under another name when we find out that it's who it is. But it doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to be banging on the door showing the picture on Facebook. It doesn't matter. I'm just happy that they're able to hellaciously stressful life they lead, that they have our products to get them through and to help them be able to deal with those stresses. That's what I'm thankful for.
Yeah, and I think that's an area why I want to focus on more of this education of chronic stress and for athletes and non-athletes, but it's just everywhere. And you think, people working, and we're in Seattle, all these tech companies, and a lot of young people working a lot of hours and just constant stress. And I just see this, I feel like it's my purpose, as it is my passion to help, spread this message out. But, starting with the triathlete world, because I think so many endurance athletes push themselves too much on top of an already stressful life. And as I said before, I want to help people do this healthy or, not be out of commission for years. So let's go into what is the best way for people to get help if they have the chronic stress, their performance slowing down, they're gaining weight, they're waking up in the middle of the night, all those symptoms we've talked about over the years. But the red flags, what I say a lot, and I have a lot of your information in my book, Life is Not a Race, people can get on Amazon, but it's what happens that we tend to avoid those red flags. And then what do we do to get help? So what's your program details about?
Well, first of all, we have them go to the adrenalfatigue.org website. And on there's some key questions. And some of those key questions are, You're tired for no reason? Are you having trouble getting up in the morning? Do you need coffee or colas to get going or keep going during the day? Do you feel run down and stressed? Do you crave salty or sweet snacks? Do you seem to struggle with life's daily demands? Can't bounce back from stress or fatigue? Not having any fun anymore? Decreased sex life? So if you answered any of those, yes, or at least 2 or 3 of those, then the body's probably in a downhill spiral of some sort. Mm-hmm. And it usually involves the adrenals. So you notice there's no specific thing that involves the adrenals there, but all of them combined do. Same thing with hypoglycemia. There are very few symptoms in the hypoglycemia, which are intimately related to cortisol and adrenal fatigue. That shows, okay, that's low blood sugar. But when you take the combined number of symptoms, then that shows you the low blood sugar pattern. And so once they do that, then we have them go to the website. There's a self-grading questionnaire they can take that's free, and they check whether or not they have adrenal fatigue or not. And if at the end of taking this questionnaire, it takes about 10 minutes, then they will know if they have mild, moderate, severe adrenal fatigue. And then if they want to, then it has a program on what they could do to help themselves. And it involves a combination of supplements, dietary supplements, 4 major dietary supplements for 4 different reasons. And then the food program that they should have, and then some exercise suggestions. One of the biggest things is learning to breathe again. One of them is to tune into your body. Anytime you find yourself not breathing from your abdomen, you're probably under stress, because people under stress tend not to use their full capacity to breathe. They only breathe very superficially. And as people, and so they have their studies on this, as people get more and more concentrated on something, they tend not to use their full capacity of breathing, and they become mildly hypoxic while they're concentrating. Mm-hmm. And so one of the best things to do is observe yourself and see, am I breathing? Am I breathing from my abdomen and it's filling my chest and I'm relaxing? Do I feel my shoulders starting to get tight? Is it hard for me to fall asleep at night? Is it hard for me to get awake in the morning? Those are all indications that things are out of whack in your body. Subtle as they may seem, well, a lot of people have trouble sleeping. Yeah, they do. A lot of people aren't healthy. I mean, you can't look at North America as being very much of a model for health. You look at some of the undeveloped countries as the better, as the Japanese have the longest lived people, and America is around 13th or 14th. And even Canadians now live longer than the Americans, and they didn't used to be. We have some of the highest birth defects. Well, I don't want to go into all the statistics, but we're not the healthiest culture to use as yardstick of what we should be measuring ourselves on. Mm-hmm. It's always a pleasure to go to other countries and see the relaxed faces, see mm-hmm. the broad smiles, see the deep happiness in the people. I know when Mother Teresa visited here, she said, America has a very deep sickness. It's a deep spiritual sickness. It's a lack of spirituality. Mm-hmm. It's not the physical sickness that's killing Americans. It's a lack of deep spirituality. Well, she has whatever her point of view is, and I'm not going to comment about that. But the fact that people can't relax, that they have difficulty taking time off. You don't see that broad, I'm so damn happy, I'm about to pee my pants look on most people. It's an indication of a kind of culture. And so you always need to look at yourself and step back and say, how old am I designing myself to live? And we should be, the average American now, if they make it past 65, the cardiac corridor, if they make it past 65, then their chances of living to 85 is about 80%. So we're getting there. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to be there on oxygen in a wheelchair. We want to be there. So our last breath is we didn't quite make it to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, or we were surrounded by our family and friends having a great picnic, and that was our last breath. We want to go out with a great deal of happiness. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't design yourself like that, it's not likely that you're going to be like that at the end of your life.
Yeah, so true. My coaching program I created 5 years ago, kind of when all this started happening with myself, is the holistic method. And just out of my own experience as a personal trainer for 25 years, and I was always teaching and training triathletes and runners. But I created the holistic method with the 8 elements that I coach people on: the nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, movement, digestion, gut health, and hydration, and happiness was my point. That I think, happiness is so essential. And I'm doing these 5-day jumpstart challenges to just teach all these 8 elements to clients. And I just started it this week. We're doing it. And I have them all write a gratitude journal. Give 3 things that you loved about today, or that did for someone else, or made you happy, or what you did for yourself. And I think it's hard for people to do that. And I was also going to throw in, I was in Paris the other week for just a quick week vacation in Paris, 5 nights, and London 2 nights. And it's so interesting, as you said, how relaxed people are. We were there on a weekend, and everyone in the park in Paris was having a picnic. And at dinner time, they're out having a picnic. I mean, we were saying we never see that here in Seattle. You rarely see a park, just grass field with people all over having a great time just hanging out. It's funny.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the weather. I mean, if you go to Edmonton, Alberta in February, where it's 40 below, you're going to find people sitting out having picnics on Sunday afternoon, pushing the snow off of the top of the picnic table, and sitting there in their parkas and mucklucks and gloves, enjoying themselves, having a nice picnic there too. So yeah, it's not just the nice weather in Paris. But anyway, once people get down, they have to then build themselves back up again, and that usually takes dietary supplements. And so people try to do it without it, and I've watched them and I've counseled them. But they almost always need dietary supplements to fill specific needs, because they've been taking it out more than they've been putting it in for such a long time that they'd have to eat a mountain of food in order to try to get some of those nutrients, and it just aren't available, especially the quality food that we have in our country. Right.
I have a lot of people say they don't like taking pills, and they don't like being pill poppers, because you take the 3 bottles a day, and you have the 2 tablets that you have. Say you do it 3 times a day if you've got a lot of high stress and fatigue going on in your body. But I think it's education to the client that you have to understand, why do you need that much vitamin C? Why do you need magnesium? Why do you need ashwagandha and all these different supplements that vitamin C? What goes on when what you kind of use up all those nutrients in your body when you're trying to keep up this energy production or have that insulin resistance and use up those nutrients.
Well, let me give you a really good example. That same person falls and hurts themselves, and they badly sprain their ankle, and they don't take extra vitamin C. So what happens? When scar tissue forms, it doesn't form along the lines of stress as easily as it forms cross fibers, and so they don't develop the full range of motion back, because vitamin C is really important in help laying down the lines of stress. The scar tissue is laid down along the lines of stress. Manganese and magnesium and zinc are very important in the hyaluronic acid, hyaluronidase buildup of that collagen tissue being reformed the way they're supposed to. And there's not enough manganese, or there's not enough magnesium, or not enough zinc. Any of those 3 can lead to that type 3 collagen not binding like it's supposed to. If their skin is broken, the type 1 collagen there. If they don't have enough silica, they don't have enough, a certain number of the B vitamins, especially if there's missing vitamin A and vitamin C once again, because vitamin C is the greatest water-soluble vitamin antioxidant in the body, then they won't heal as fast. So even a simple little thing everybody knows about vitamin C, unless they take sufficient amounts, then they'll take longer to recover, and things won't be as complete, and it'll be more easy for them to re-injure themselves when they start training again.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're running out of time. There's so many other things to talk about, but how can people find you or your clinic? Can you go see you at Tucson or one of your
Well, I'm really hard to find, but I don't practice anymore. So you wouldn't find a sign out or anything like that. But if you want to go see adrenalfatigue.org is the best way. If they have questions, they can just email info or doctor, you can email Dr. Wilson at drwilsons.com is another way they can email, and I'm happy to answer any email questions that they have. You can go on our website, adrenalfatigue.org. If they have questions, they can call 188-ADRENAL, and one of the staff there can help answer the questions. And they can look around. The book is called Adrenal Fatigue, the 21st Century Stress Syndrome. Now it's in a 29th printing, I believe.
Wow.
And it's helped a lot of people because it seemed to hit a note of helping. The nice thing, I was so lucky when I started practice. I had all these people who were so desperately ill. And I got a chance to work with these people and learn from the ground up what it took to get them well again. And those eventually went into my supplements. And so developed a successful program. And that's why it's so successful, is because it's based on the science of I'm an egghead too with 3 doctorate degrees. But I also I was in the ditches for about 35 years with treating patients and getting people well as well. And so you'll find me on YouTube. There's about 20 lectures on YouTube on different aspects of adrenal health. But people can get themselves well. I've had people that were so sick they couldn't even feed themselves, and they got back to normal life before. And they did it by following the book and taking the supplements.
Yeah, and that's key. I know personally, you have to identify your energy robbers, as you say in your book, and identify what is the source of stress, if it's internal and external, or all of the above. But that until you can keep working on stuff, but so much of it is the supplements and the lifestyle changes and removing those things that keep causing you that anxiety and that stress and that constant frustration and that stuff. Until you deal with that, I find my own self that it's not going to get better until I just cut that off and move on from that major source of stress for myself. And I think a lot of people are like that. It's like until you quit your job or move out of that town or whatever it is, you have to just, if your health isn't getting better and it's taken a long time and you're trying everything, you might just need to cut the rope sometime and move on.
People say, I don't like taking so many pills. Well, which don't you like? Feeling as bad as you feel or not taking so many pills? Well, yeah. I would choose the pills because, for one thing, they're restorative, and you have to, I'm not supposed to use this word cure, but at some point in the future, if your lifestyle is balanced and your food intake is good, you won't need those supplements anymore. It's not forever. It's usually about 1.5 years to 2. Now, if people don't get their life together, if they continue to push themselves and stress themselves, then at least it'll keep them from burning out again, and it'll keep them going. But what I'm saying is that's a good trade-off. Taking a few more pills than they want to versus feeling as bad as they could.
I do testimonial that they do make a difference for me. And when I'm starting to feel more run down and had a big stressful experience happen, and, when I get back on track with that, combined with learning how to breathe and do the infrared sauna and go for walks and take more rest days and active recovery rather than trying to do garbage workouts, are really not beneficial. So now I know, a little bit more how to coach my own self on how to fix that when you go off the rails.
Good for you.
Yeah, long process. But thank you so much. And I love that you can still come on our show, even though you're kind of out enjoying retirement life and enjoying your...
I'm not retired.
Well, not seeing patients, I guess, but you're always busy doing something and speaking all over.
Yeah, I'm just 74. It doesn't mean I'm retired. No,
that's still young.
I'm pretty active. And I'm always happy to help people understand themselves, how to get over stress, how to recover from things. So anytime is a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Debbie.
Yes, thank you so much. And we will hopefully have you on the show again next year.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.